Hello again. Gwe, bonjour, Ganagok. My name is WhiteDove, and I want to thank you for joining me for the series, Silence Must Be Heard. Today I want to talk more about identity. There's a lot of issues surrounding identity, especially in Native America, with the aboriginal nations of North America in both the United States and Canada. A lot of those issues involve the tribal connections to the land. When the native peoples of this land were removed from their ancestral homelands by the newcomers during colonization, it posed a threat to the survival of the remaining the indigenous peoples who survived both the diseases that the Europeans brought and also the genocide, the acts of genocide against the aboriginal peoples of this land. So removal of the remaining native peoples or indigenous peoples from their ancestral homelands was a third tactic towards making them extinct, because the surviving aboriginal peoples of North America greatly attached their identity to their ancestral homelands, where their ancestors, previous generations had existed for thousands of years. As the newcomers colonized and settled in New England, in the whole eastern part of the United States and Canada, then the native peoples, the aboriginal peoples, were forced to move westward. In fact, Oklahoma, what is now Oklahoma, became what I call a dumping ground for many Native American nations. That's where the native peoples were forced to go to when they were sort of kicked out of their ancestral homelands here in the eastern part of Turtle Island, or North America. The Cherokee were one of those nations, and in the history of the Aboriginal peoples of this continent, the Cherokees are well known for the Trail of Tears. This is when the Cherokees were forced out of the state of Georgia after trying so hard to retain their cultures, and also in trying to adapt also to the newcomers' ways, developing their own farming methods, their own alphabet, their own newspapers, their own schools, and the newcomers were jealous of their lands in Georgia, and also jealous of their prosperity. And the state of Georgia just kicked the Cherokees right out and forced them to walk to Oklahoma, where hundreds of the Cherokee people died during that march. They were made to march to Oklahoma under the most impoverished conditions, malnourished and so forth. This is an example of what happened in the removal of Aboriginal people from their ancestral homelands. Many of them lost a sense of their identity because they lost their land base. Whereas people who live here in the United States, even now, if they have French ancestry, they can go to France to explore their French heritage, and even they can go even to Quebec as well to explore their French heritage. People who are Irish today can go to Ireland to explore their Irish heritage and the Gaelic language of their ancestors and so forth. And There are so many examples of that. People who are German Americans can go back and visit Germany to investigate and explore their German heritage and their ancestral language. African Americans, they can go back to Africa often and retrace their ancestral languages and their ancestral homelands. But what about the Aboriginal peoples of this land? Where do they go to reconnect with their ancestral homelands and with their ancestral languages when all that was taken away from them during colonization? Obviously, there's a part of me that still knows, even when I was born, even though I was not raised in a Passamaquoddy community on former Passamaquoddy homelands. A part of me knew I was Passamaquoddy at the deepest genetic level. And the presence of whale in my life, whale coming to me while I was 5 years old, was a testimony that I am Passamaquoddy. So now where do I go to reconnect with my Passamaquoddy ancestral homelands and nation? And I use myself as an example because there are people all over North America who have Aboriginal heritage and roots like I do. And since their nations, their indigenous nations were removed from their ancestral homelands during colonization, where do they go to reconnect with their nationhood, with their nations? Where do they go to reconnect with their languages, the languages of their ancestors? That's where that whole issue comes about identity and the connection with the land. To be a nation, one needs to have a land base. And colonization took away many of the ancestral homelands for many of the 500 nations of Aboriginal peoples that were here during colonization. Some of the Aboriginal peoples still remain in their ancestral homelands, but still their ancestral homelands had shrunk a lot because so much was taken from them. The other issue is the blood quantum issue that the United States came up with as another tactic, genocidal tactic against Aboriginal people. The thought that you can dilute your heritage, that you can water down your heritage by intermarrying into other heritages. The government didn't want to be responsible for supporting the Aboriginal peoples now that they were stripped of all their resources for making a living. So the U.S. government came up with this blood quantum business that if you keep marrying and intermarrying with other non-native people, non-Aboriginal people, your own heritage becomes watered down, and now you don't qualify for any kinds of economic or financial assistance, even if you live on the reservations. So there's a lot of issues around this blood quantum business that the government, the U.S. and Canadian governments have come up with in the past. Yet if a person has just one drop, so to speak, of African American blood, they're considered black. So go figure, with the Native Americans, the Aboriginal peoples, you have to prove that you have 50% or 75% native blood. This whole blood thing just doesn't make any sense. Silence must be heard. Express your true identity.